episode, we're going to talk about a local legend that's close to my heart and an 80s toy that really rocks. So, stick around. Hello and welcome to the Monster Preservation and Research Society. My name's Rob, and it's just something about this time of year that gets my mind thinking about monsters. That could be because about 35 years ago, I stumbled upon my first cryptozoology book, and that was America's Very Own Monsters by Daniel Cohen. I've talked about the book before in a summer episode about 2 years ago, and a couple times over on the blog. Anyways, before I found this book, I was into monsters as it was. It's kind of hard not to be when you grow up on a steady diet of Star Wars, Clash of the Titans, Ray Harryhausen movies. I had read many books up to this point on mythology and movie monsters, but this was the first time I saw some of these creatures for the first time, and some of them lived pretty close to home. I found this book in my elementary school library, and I was instantly enthralled. One of the creatures in the book had a bigger impact than the others. It was something that haunted my imagination and my dreams. For me, it all started at a sleepover. The day I checked out the book was a Friday, and I was heading over to one of my friend's house for a sleepover. I was in the 3rd grade at the time, and his house was kind of tucked away on a back road out in the country. It was quiet and dark, and those were two things I was not accustomed to growing up next to a major highway. And those two things are fertile ground for fear to grow. The name Goatman can mean many different things to many different people across America and the world. The image of a half-goat and half-man creature has punctuated folklore and myth for thousands of years across Europe, and more recently now across North America. Some say the origins of the Goatman that haunts Prince George's County in Maryland can be traced back to the 1950s. There are 3 very distinctive stories of how the Goatman came to be, but all of them converge into one axe-wielding, murderous beast that calls the area around Fletcherstown Road home. One story is of a lonely goat farmer that kept to himself, tending to his goats and his fields on Fletchertown Road. After a group of teens accidentally, or not, depending on the story, slaughtered his beloved goats in a prank that went horribly wrong, the farmer donned the hides of his deceased goats and went on a murderous rampage of revenge that ended in the death of 14 people. There have been no records of these deaths that could be found. Some people contribute the unrecorded deaths of 14 hikers and campers in 1962 to a creature akin to a Sasquatch, which they have dubbed the Goatman. They say this hawking, shaggy creature with horns stalks the woods of Prince George's County and attacks anything that treads into its territory. In 1971, there were witnesses to one of these attacks. One night in early November in the town of Bowie, 16-year-old April Edwards and her friends heard noises outside her home and saw a large creature. The next morning, April and her family discovered that their family dog, Ginger, had disappeared. Around this time, reports of an animal-like creature that walks on 2 legs increase around Fletcherstown Road. Days later, Ginger was found near Fletcherstown Road, dead and headless. Her body was found by 3 teens, brothers Ray Hayden and John Hayden, and their friend Willie Green. Authorities said the wound was clean and precise. The press theorized that Ginger was struck by a train which sent her body and head flying in different directions, even though a head was never recovered from the area. Years later, John Hayden was interviewed about what happened in 1971. He recalled that the night before he saw something. It was about 6 feet tall, walked on 2 legs, and was hairy. Hayden also noticed that it made a high-pitched sound like a squeal. In the same magazine article, April Edwards was also interviewed, and was asked about what she saw and the grim fate of her dog Ginger. She said, "People came here and called it folklore, and the papers made us out to be ignorant hillbillies who didn't know any better. But what I saw was real, and I know I'm not crazy. Whatever it was, I believed it killed my dog. It's the third origin of the Goatman that has seemed to stick, and it's the story I was introduced to in Daniel Cohen's book, America's Very Own Monsters. It's unknown when this story rose in popularity, but it really encapsulates America's fears in modern science and the fears brought about by the nuclear threat escalating across America. In most of the stories that float around Maryland about the Goatman, he isn't given a name. His name has been lost to time and the shadow that is cast upon most legends and folk tales. Some say his name was Dr. Stephen Fletcher, and he was a scientist working at the United States Department of Agriculture's Agricultural Research Center located in Beltsville, Maryland. The Beltsville Research Agriculture Center is a nondescript stretch of farmland with a campus of nice brick buildings scattered about. These brick buildings look like nice office buildings, but inside house many research facilities. The aim of the Research Agricultural Center is to provide improvements in the production of fruits and vegetables, the care and well-being of livestock, and the study of natural resources. Some feel that more sinister and godless acts take place in the hidden, shadowy areas of this campus. It is within these hidden, shadowy areas where Dr. Fletcher's story begins. One late night, Dr. Fletcher was working on an experiment that used the DNA of a goat. It is believed that this experiment wasn't pertaining to the well-being of livestock, but was actually an experiment for a shadowy organization of the government that wanted to create animal hybrid soldiers for the battlefield. The experiment backfired, and there was an accident in Dr. Fletcher's lab that caused him to be infused with the goat DNA. Injured and in pain, he fled the lab and disappeared into the nearby woods. Soon after, the violent attacks of the Goatman began. Motorists traveling on Fletchertown Road soon reported seeing a humanoid goat with an axe patrolling the area. They also say the creature would erupt from the forest and attack their vehicles, slamming the axe into the windows or car hoods. Many teens experienced the Goatman while they were parked in hidden and secluded areas. One known report said a large goat-like creature walked around their vehicle, scraping an axe along the car until it quickly disappeared. After the shock and fear wore off, they quickly sped off. To this day, people still report seeing the Goatman on Fletcherstown Road, especially where the road goes outside of Bowie's city limits. To this day, people in the area believe the Goatman lays in wait inside a hidden cave under a bridge dubbed by locals as Crybaby Bridge, which is a bridge, one of many in Maryland, with a grisly ghost story attached. The bridge that most assume is the Crybaby Bridge is a one-lane bridge with the proper name of the Governor's Bridge that happens to be on the land owned by the Beltsville Research Agricultural Center. It's hard for anyone to get close to the bridge or the area itself because white nondescript trucks patrol the area to keep people out or to keep something inside the grounds. This is a story that I have carried with me for 35 odd years. Could the Goatman be a deranged goat farmer out for revenge? A relative of Bigfoot? Or is it a mad scientist that has been cursed by playing God one too many times? The Goatman could even be a creature of legend like the mythical satyr that has somehow found its way into the deep dark woods around Fletcherstown Road in Prince George's County, Maryland. That would make sense because the satyr of Greco-Roman myth was a protector of the woods and also was violently lustful. Maybe that would explain his fascination with teens parked at Lover's Lane. There are many Goatmen scattered across America. Some haunt bridges, some carry axes, but this is the only one that is a mutated scientist with an insatiable lust for blood. It's an amazing thing to look back on something from your childhood and realize you didn't really appreciate it when it was around. You see it with fresh eyes after all these years, or decades, and realize it was pretty cool. You notice that something that you once thought was lame and unexpired was actually well made and imaginative. Sometimes you need a fresh perspective that only comes with age and a healthy dose of nostalgia. The monsters I'm talking about come from the 1986 Rock Lords toy line, and they're called the Narlies. The Rock Lords were a toy line that was a spin-off of the GoBots. Both the GoBots and the Rock Lords were originally created by Bandai as part of the Machine Robo series of toys, but surprisingly the Narlies were never released in Japan. The Narlies are a small, furry creature that live on the Rock Lord's planet of Cortex. Naturally, some are good and some are evil. The official description of the Narlies tells us, Narlies are more than just pets. They're wild rock animals dreaded by the most fierce rock warriors. They share a quick-tempered fierceness that cannot be trusted. The good Narlies live with Boulder to help during battle with Magmar's evil forces. Magmar uses his herd of pets to secure his conquest of Cortex. When they're pushed around, the Narlies shake their tails and their jaws snap and their fur moves, making them look alive. Additionally, each Narlie produced a sound when it was moved, and each had their own individual sound. 2 waves of Narlies were released. There were only 2 good Narlies, and they were Gnarly Hog and Gnarly Fint, and there were 6 bad Narlies, which were Gnarly Lizard, Gnarly Baboon, Gnarly Rhino, Gnarly Gator, Gnarly Lion, and Gnarly Bat, for a total of 8. And if you didn't notice, they kind of had a theme to their names. There was also a leader of the bad Narlies released named Snarly Gnarly, who was a gnarly bull. He was much bigger than the other Narlies and had motorized action. Both waves were released in the US, and the second wave was and is very hard to find. As I said, at the time I didn't appreciate how great these little monsters were, or how great the Rock Lord's line was in general. Now, I know, they only turned into simple rocks, gems, boulders, but they had great face sculpts, great accessories, and they were pretty imaginative. I regret missing out on this toy line when I was a kid, and I hope to get some of them into my collection one day. And as an added bonus, they look like that dude from Munchies with that hair. And this dude here, Gnarly Gator, looks like Blanca from Street Fighter. I definitely have to get him into my collection one day. Anyway, thanks for watching Monster Preservation and Research Society. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you got something to say, please leave a comment. I love reading them and I love getting back to everybody. And if you're new around here and you enjoyed this or any of the other episodes that YouTube is recommending down here, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you'll be notified whenever there's a new episode. So anyway, until next time, keep being rad and stay dorky.